The grand courtroom of the Galactic Empire shimmered with opulence, its towering obsidian pillars etched with the conquests of 1,000 worlds. Light cascaded through crystalline domes, casting a fractured glow upon the assembled dignitaries, high-ranking officials draped in regal silks, military leaders adorned in gleaming war medals, and the emperor himself, seated upon his throne of star-forged metal. Before them, shackled and bruised, stood an old man. His clothes, torn and bloodied from interrogation, barely clung to his frail form, yet his eyes burned with quiet defiance. Elias Voss, former general of the last human rebellion, faced the might of the empire not with fear, but with something far more dangerous: certainty. A murmur of amusement rippled through the chamber. Some of the younger officers smirked. The sight of this frail relic of a defeated species attempting to maintain his dignity was laughable. Humanity had been crushed years ago, its colonies absorbed, its resistance shattered. Yet this Elias had refused to kneel. The emperor leaned forward, his golden eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Elias Voss," he intoned, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your war is over. Your people are nothing but scattered remnants, useful only as laborers and entertainment. And yet, you stand before us as if you are owed something other than death." Laughter swelled in the room. Elias remained silent. The emperor gestured lazily, and a uniformed officer stepped forward, unrolling a parchment embedded with neural circuitry. "Elias Voss, formerly of the human resistance, you are found guilty of high treason against the empire. Your punishment is death, to be carried out immediately. Do you have any final words?" Elias raised his head. His lips, cracked from thirst, parted into a faint, knowing smile. "You should have killed me long ago." The laughter faltered. A few exchanged uncertain glances. The emperor's amusement thinned into irritation. "You speak as if your death has meaning." "It does," Elias murmured. "But not for me." Silence thickened, pressing against the chamber like an unspoken warning. The emperor's fingers drummed against the armrest of his throne, his patience thinning. "Ah, a dying man's riddles. Pathetic. You misunderstand." Elias' voice, though hoarse, carried through the hall with unnerving steadiness. "I am not your concern. I never was." The emperor gestured sharply, and a guard drove a baton into Elias' ribs, sending him to his knees. The old man coughed, spitting blood onto the polished floor, yet his eyes never left the emperor's. "You think you've won," Elias continued, "but you never understood what you were dealing with. What he is." The emperor exhaled slowly as if indulging a child's last tantrum. "Ah yes, the son of yours. A ghost in the dark. A myth you whisper to keep hope alive. But there is no hope for your kind." He leaned forward, voice rich with mockery. "Tell me, where is this great avenger? Why does he not storm my gates and strike me down?" Elias only smiled. The emperor sighed, losing interest. He turned to his executioner, a towering reptilian brute clad in ceremonial black armor. "End this." The executioner unsheathed a blade, its edge humming with energy. He raised it high, the light glinting off its surface, casting a razor-thin reflection in Elias' unwavering eyes. Then the lights flickered. A low vibration hummed through the chamber, a sensation deep in the bones rather than the ears. It was subtle at first, like a whisper on the edge of hearing, but it swelled, growing into something undeniable. The air felt thick, charged, as if the very molecules trembled in anticipation. A muffled voice crackled over the Imperial Guard's communicators. "Your Majesty, we have a static." Then nothing. The emperor frowned. "Report." No response. The vibration intensified. A distant thud resonated through the floor, followed by another. The guards shifted uneasily. The executioner hesitated, glancing toward the great entry doors. Then came the screams. Faint at first, muffled by layers of architecture and distance. But they grew. Panicked. The distinct sound of men dying. A captain, rigid with unease, activated the chamber's security feed. A holographic display flared to life, showing the Imperial Plaza just outside the courtroom. It was a scene of chaos. Soldiers scrambled, firing wildly at something unseen. Gunfire flickered in the dusk, but whatever they were shooting at was faster. A shadow streaked between them, and men fell in droves, their bodies crumpling before they could react. The emperor rose from his throne, his amusement gone. "What is this?" The image crackled, distorted. The last thing the feed captured before going black was a silhouette moving through the carnage, advancing with inhuman precision. A single figure. Elias let out a soft chuckle, low and knowing. The emperor turned on him, eyes flashing with fury. "What have you done?" Elias exhaled slowly, his smile widening. "You laughed at an old man." He met the emperor's gaze, unafraid. "But you should have feared his son." The great doors trembled. The light flickered again, then died. The chamber plunged into darkness. The only sounds were the rapid, panicked breaths of the assembled officials and the distant echoes of battle outside. Then, without warning, emergency lighting flickered to life, bathing the courtroom in a sickly red glow. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, twisting with the tremors that now pulsed through the floor. The great doors, reinforced with imperial alloys, buckled with a deafening boom. Dust rained from the vaulted ceiling as the impact sent a sharp tremor through the room. The guards snapped to attention, raising their weapons toward the entrance, their grips unsteady. Another impact. The metal warped inward, groaning under the strain. The emperor, for the first time in decades, felt the cold claw of uncertainty. He had ruled unchallenged for so long, had crushed rebellions with a flick of his hand, yet now something was coming, something that had turned his impenetrable fortress into a brittle husk. He turned sharply to his generals. "Deploy the elite guard. Whoever, whatever, this is, I want it reduced to ash." Before the order could even be transmitted, the doors exploded inward. A shockwave ripped through the courtroom, hurling guards and dignitaries across the floor. Smoke and fire licked the edges of the shattered frame, and through the swirling embers, a lone figure emerged. Tall, silent. His armor was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen, a seamless black exoskeleton that seemed less like metal and more like living shadow. It clung to his frame with an unnatural fluidity, shifting as he moved. No insignias. No emblems of allegiance. Just darkness bleeding into the world around him. Lucian Voss stepped forward. The executioner, still gripping his blade, reacted first. With a roar, he lunged, his weapon arcing through the air with deadly precision. Lucian did not move. The blade met him and stopped. Not against armor. Not against a shield. It simply ceased to exist, dissolving into dust before it could touch him. The executioner stumbled back, his eyes wide with something that was not fear, but something deeper. Something primal. Lucian raised a single hand. The executioner screamed. His body convulsed, lifting into the air as if an unseen force had gripped his very essence. His form twisted, bones snapping in quick, sickening bursts. Then, without ceremony, he crumbled, flesh, armor and all, into nothingness. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Lucian turned his gaze to the emperor. Though his face remained obscured beneath the dark sheen of his helmet, the weight of his stare was suffocating. The emperor straightened, forcing steel into his voice. "You must be the son." Lucian did not answer. "Do you believe yourself to be the end of my empire?" The emperor took a measured step forward, his voice regaining its usual authority. "Do you think yourself a god, come to strike me down?" Lucian tilted his head slightly as if considering the words. Then at last he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber like a whisper wrapped in thunder. "I am not here to strike you down." The emperor smirked, but the expression did not reach his eyes. "Then what, exactly, are you here to do?" Lucian took another step forward and the temperature in the room plummeted. Condensation formed on the walls. The officials shivered, their breath misting in the crimson light. To end what should have never begun. The emperor's smirk vanished. He turned sharply to his guards. "Kill him." The elite guard, the finest warriors of the empire, moved as one. Their weapons ignited, disintegration beams slicing through the air, targeting every vital point on Lucian's body. Not a single shot landed. Lucian blurred, moving faster than the eye could follow. One guard's weapon vanished from his hands, torn apart at the molecular level. Another was lifted from the ground, his armor collapsing inward as if space itself had turned against him. A third managed a single step before his own energy rifle exploded in his grip, consuming him in white-hot light. The rest hesitated. Lucian moved again. Not like a soldier. Not like a man. Like a force of nature. The guards fell in seconds, reduced to lifeless husks before their minds could even register their deaths. Lucian stopped. The emperor remained standing, though his fingers now gripped the armrests of his throne with knuckle-whitening force. "You misunderstand the nature of power," Lucian said. "You believe it to be the weight of armies, the strength of fleets. But power is not control. It is not dominion." The emperor forced himself to breathe evenly. "And what do you call it?" Lucian looked past him, to the shattered doors, to the night sky beyond. "It is the absence of opposition." A distant rumble answered his words. The emperor turned, his gaze snapping to the open expanse beyond the courtroom. His city, his empire's heart, was burning. Entire districts collapsed in on themselves, drawn into vast, impossible voids. Ships lay crippled in the sky, their systems failing without explanation. The stars themselves seemed to flicker, their light dimming as if something unseen was swallowing the heavens. Lucian took another step and the throne room itself trembled. The emperor's vision blurred at the edges, his body suddenly heavy, as if the very gravity around him was no longer obeying natural laws. "You have taken much from the universe," Lucian murmured, his voice impossibly close, though he had not moved. "It is time to return what was stolen." The emperor, for the first time in his reign, had no words. Lucian raised his hand once more and the air split. Reality itself groaned. A fracture, deep and unnatural, carved through the space between them, widening with a hunger that defied all reason. The emperor fell to his knees. He had always believed himself to be the apex of creation, the master of all he surveyed. Yet now, as the walls of his empire buckled, as the very stars dimmed before the presence of something far greater than himself, he understood. This was not a man. This was the end of worlds. The emperor struggled to his feet, every muscle in his body resisting as if unseen hands pressed him down. The throne room, his domain, his seat of absolute power, was dissolving around him. The marble floors cracked, splintering into nothingness. The towering pillars that once told the story of his empire's rise crumbled, their engraved victories erased in an instant. The vast chamber, once a place of judgment, was now a graveyard of falling stone and flickering light. And in the center of it all, Lucian stood unmoving. The emperor forced himself to speak, though his voice, once powerful enough to command fleets, now wavered. "What are you?" Lucian tilted his head slightly, the motion eerily smooth, inhuman. "The end." The words weren't shouted, weren't proclaimed as a war cry. They were simply stated as fact. And the universe bent to them. Outside, the capital world groaned. Vast, spiraling towers that had stood for millennia bent as if caught in the grip of something unseen. The planetary shields that had once withstood entire armadas flickered and failed, their energy bleeding into the void. The imperial fleet, which had darkened the skies in sheer number, drifted lifelessly, engines dead, systems unresponsive, trapped in an artificial silence. But the most horrifying thing wasn't the destruction. It was the absence. Not fire, not explosions, not devastation. Things simply ceased to exist. Entire districts of the city vanished as if they had never been there. The mighty spires that reached for the heavens did not collapse. They were erased, removed from reality as if they had never been conceived in the first place. The emperor's breath came in ragged gasps. He had faced rebellions, assassination attempts, alien warlords who had sworn to tear his empire apart. He had laughed in the face of gods. But this was beyond his understanding. You think this is justice?" he whispered, his golden robes whipping around him as unseen forces tore through the chamber. Lucian stepped forward. The ground beneath his feet remained untouched, unbroken, while everything else collapsed into oblivion. He was not part of this world. Not anymore. "This is balance." The emperor laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You believe yourself to be something greater, but you are just a weapon." He gestured weakly at the devastation beyond the throne room. "You are destruction, nothing more. A force with no direction." For the first time, Lucian moved with purpose. In a blink, he was before the emperor, standing over him, his shadow stretching unnaturally across the ruins. "A force with no direction?" Lucian murmured. "Your empire is built upon conquest, subjugation, the erasure of entire species." He knelt slightly, his voice dropping lower. "Tell me, Emperor, when you burned my home, when you slaughtered my people, when you laughed as my father was dragged in chains, was that direction?" The emperor clenched his jaw, refusing to look away. Lucian exhaled, a slow, measured breath. "You were right about one thing." A faint glimmer of hope flickered in the emperor's eyes. Lucian's voice turned softer, almost distant. "I was a weapon." The emperor's expression shifted. "Was?" Lucian straightened. Behind him, the air rippled, and the very fabric of reality shifted. "I was forged for vengeance. Crafted in the spaces between worlds, rebuilt into something neither man nor machine." He glanced at his own hands, flexing his fingers as if they were unfamiliar to him. "For years I was nothing but purpose. A force aimed at a target." The emperor's pulse quickened. "Then, you have no purpose beyond this?" He forced a smirk, though it was brittle. "You will burn out. A storm without a master. A tide with no shore." Lucian met his gaze. No. The Emperor opened his mouth to retort, but then he felt it. The ground beneath him ceased to be ground. The air around him no longer carried weight. The throne room, the capital city, the sky itself, gone. There was only darkness. The Emperor stood alone in an endless void. No walls. No stars. No sound. And then a whisper. You took everything from me. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You erased my people. The Emperor turned, searching, but there was no direction to turn to. Only the abyss. You built an empire on death. The void pulsed and suddenly he saw. A vision unfolded before him, not in the past, not in memory, but as if he were living it. Cities, thriving under alien suns, reduced to ash. Families torn from their homes, their cries fading into the abyss. Entire species eradicated at his command. And then the last image, a child. Taken. Not killed, no. Taken. Changed. Turned into what now stood before him. The Emperor fell to his knees. You have destroyed worlds, Lucian's voice murmured. Now you will join them. The Emperor tried to speak, but his voice was gone. And so was he. Reality itself sealed shut around the space he had occupied, as if he had never existed. Lucian stood alone amidst the ruins of the Empire's heart. The silence was not of death, not of destruction, but of absence. A finality beyond mere annihilation. He turned to the lone figure still standing in the rubble, Elias Voss. The old man, though weak, remained upright. His face, lined with age and suffering, bore an expression not of fear, but of understanding. You always had a choice, Elias said softly. Lucian met his father's gaze. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. A remnant of the boy he had once been. A whisper of something beyond vengeance. Then without a word he stepped back. The air around him warped, bent, and then he was gone. Elias stood amidst the wreckage of what had once been the greatest empire in the galaxy. The sky above was empty, the stars clearer than they had ever been, unshackled from the weight of tyranny. The legend of the man who ended worlds would spread. But whether he was savior or destroyer, that was a story for those who remained. Elias turned his face to the sky and let out a breath he had been holding for far too long.